You out this world, need some space from me. I'm out here, girl. I'm back up in the street. Really got time to fuss and fight no more. Why you tripping, baby? You know you invited. Acting like you know what's up, but you ain't psychic. Told you nothing going down, but you ain't like it. I told you nothing going down when you.
What's up, and welcome to another episode of Gizmo Slip Tech. Today we're taking a look at the Lenovo Legion 7. Now this is one of the more expensive but also more premium laptops in the Legion lineup, and I gotta tell you, I've been very impressed overall with this machine. It's not the best bang for the buck, it's not necessarily the best performance you can get, especially for the money, but it's a great all-around package. Let's take a look at the specs. Now this configuration of the Legion 7 costs $1699, comes with a Ryzen 7 5800H with 8 cores and 16 threads, has a base TDP of 50 watts when you're under a dual load with CPU and GPU both engaged, and has a consistent 72 watts of power to the CPU when under a CPU only load. These CPU wattages are a bit lower than some of the competition. Now the RTX 3060 has 6 gigs of GDDR6, has 111 watts under a dual load, and 128 watts when under a GPU primary load, so basically 130 watt TDP. Now the Legion 7 comes with 16 gigs of DDR4 3200 MHz RAM, and while this is the same speed as many of the other laptops on the market, the RAM included, at least in my unit, is slower than the RAM included, for example, on my SCAR 15. Now this does minorly affect CPU-bound game performance, especially in certain titles such as Shadow of the Tomb Raider. Now in my past tests comparing memory, I've seen as much as a 14% performance improvement with the faster memory, and I believe the key factor here is that we have faster sub timings on the better memory. Now, if you're curious about the RAM speed in your own gaming laptop, one test that's quick and free is User Benchmark. This will let you see your memory read and write speeds as well as the latency. And you can see that the two 8GB sticks from Samsung included on the Legion 7 have much slower read and write speeds for both multi-core and single core. I'll have a link in the description down below to some faster memory, but I wouldn't say that it's especially needed unless you plan on playing primarily CPU-bound games. Especially since this laptop comes with a QHD resolution where you're going to be primarily GPU-bound much more often than you would be if you had a 1080p display. Now, of course, I want to also mention that Lenovo offers an RTX 3070 up to 140 watt and an RTX 3080 150 to 165 watt variant, and given the performance of the RTX 3060 in this machine, it makes me very curious to review the higher end models and see exactly how they would perform as well. Now the 16-inch 2560 by 1600 resolution display, which is a 16 by 10 aspect ratio, this is one of the newer things, the new kind of revolutions in gaming laptops. This screen size and aspect ratio is going to be very popular because this is basically a 15.6-inch laptop size, but with a slightly larger display. Mainly the increased display size is from increasing the height of the display and reducing the bottom bezel as well as the side and top bezels. This is one of my favorite features of the Legion 7, and it should be featured on a lot more laptops going forward. Now I measured the Legion 7 display at 502 nits in the center, 93% sRGB, 75% Adobe, and 74% P3 color gamuts. The contrast was 980 to 1, which is very good. Now the color gamut on this laptop is solid, great for a gaming display, and the brightness and contrast are exceptionally good. The other great thing about the display, of course, is that it's a QHD 16 by 10 aspect ratio, so it's going to be great for spreadsheets and for playing video games. If there was any major weakness to the display, I'd say it's in the color gamut section, because ideally I was hoping the display would be closer to 100% Adobe RGB for all of you professionals out there. Unfortunately, it may not be colorful enough for people that need to do video editing, but that'll depend on how serious you are about your displays. Now, one great thing about the Legion 7 is that we have a MUX switch for improved CPU-bound game performance, and then we also have G-Sync, and oftentimes these things are not compatible because when you go to turn off the G-Sync, you're using FreeSync through the AMD GPU, but we're not doing that. Lenovo did not skimp on that feature, so when you turn off the integrated GPU, you still have G-Sync when you connect directly to the laptop internal display. 2 giant thumbs up. Not all laptops have that feature. Now it comes with 1 terabyte of PCIe SSD storage with an extra PCIe SSD slot open. Now I weighed the laptop at 5.54 pounds and it's 0.93 inches thick, so fairly thin overall, and it comes with Wi-Fi 6 and Bluetooth 5.1. Now the overall design for the Legion 7 is one of my favorite laptops for all of 2021 so far. If not my favorite, it's right up there with the Alienware X17. Not only does the laptop look amazing with the RGB coming out the vents and the incredible circular RGB patterns, the Legion 7 also features an all-metal build quality with great attention to detail and quality of feel. Like, it just feels very premium in your hands, the way an expensive gaming laptop should feel. This is what the keyboard sounds like. Now I really love the keyboard. It has a great soft tactile feel, and we have a full number pad with dedicated home and page up and page down buttons. The touchpad also feels solidly mounted and has a good smooth surface and a solid click. Now we have a great port selection on the Legion 7, though I am disappointed that we don't have a USB-A kind of on the sides, because I plug a lot of USB-As into my devices. So this means every time I need to plug in a USB-A, I have to put the laptop screen down and look over the top and plug it in. Thankfully, there are some logos for where you can plug it in, so you don't actually have to get too far down to see where the port is, but it was still a big hassle nonetheless. Now on the left, we have a headset port and a USB-C with DisplayPort 1.4. On the back, we have 3 USB-As, another USB-C, an HDMI 2.1 Ethernet port, and of course the power adapter port. On the right side, we also have another USB-C and a webcam privacy switch. So this is a very generous amount of USB-Cs, 3 A's and 3 USB-Cs, that's pretty incredible. And we also have that high bandwidth HDMI 2.1 for exporting video to VR headsets or to 4K 120Hz external monitors. My only criticism of the ports on the Legion 7 is really that it's just missing Thunderbolt 4 and a full-size SD card slot, which of course I want all laptops to have because I use that every day. So how does the Legion 7 actually perform in benchmarks and in games? Let's take a look. Now in Timespy, we got 89.59, which is excellent for an RTX 3060. Now in 3D Mark Timespy points per pound, we got 1617, which is solid, especially considering we only have an RTX 3060. Now in our points per dollar category, we got 5.27, which is again pretty solid, but nothing amazing, especially since RTX 3060 laptops are supposed to be like really good bang for the buck. This still really isn't that good of a bang for the buck. I'm curious if maybe the RTX 3070 version would score a bit better here, but I'm not sure. We don't know the pricing on that version yet. Now for Cinebench R23, we got 12,857, which is excellent for a Ryzen 7 5800H processor. But as you can see, the $1,799 Ryzen 9 5900HX in the Strix G17 does manage to pull quite a bit ahead at 13,466. Now for single core scores, for some reason, we only scored 1322, which is a bit lower than I would expect. Now for Cinebench R20, we got 5,055, which is right up there where I would expect it to be, a little bit behind the Ryzen 9 5900HX laptops. For Cinebench R20 points per pound, we're in the middle of the pack, which makes sense because this is a 16-inch laptop, though it is still fairly thin and light. Now we are getting surprisingly good points per dollar considering the $1699 price point. We got 8 minutes 10 seconds in our Handbrake 4K render time, which again is solid, a little bit behind the Ryzen 9 5900HX processors. Now for my dual load stress test, I run Firestrike physics test as well as the Heaven benchmark at the same time for an extended period of time until heat saturation has occurred, and then I measure the fan noise, clock speed, and temperatures for the CPU and GPU, and here are the results. Now in quiet mode, we got 43.3 decibels, which is fairly noticeable still, so you're not going to get like perfect quiet from this machine, at least not if you're doing a heavy load. But the good thing is we still had reasonable temperatures on the CPU and GPU, reaching 64 degrees and 68 degrees. This is what the quiet fan profile sounds like. And this is what balanced sounds like. This is what performance mode sounds like. This is what performance mode sounds like. For the balanced noise profile, we got 46.5 decibels, which is fairly good for a balanced profile, moderately quiet, 65 degrees on the GPU, and 81.5 degrees on the CPU. These are again very solid temperatures. Now in the performance fan profile, we got 52.8 decibels. So this is as loud as it's going to get because we cannot enable max fan, which is kind of a big sad in my opinion. I think that should probably be an included feature for just about everyone, especially for people that are in warmer environments that may not have an air conditioner and you want to be able to play at maximum settings. You can't crank up the fans as much as possible, and you've just got to trust that Lenovo has programmed their laptop to crank the fans when the temperatures go up. That said, the decibels are very reasonable at 52.8, and our temperatures are also very good at 70 degrees Celsius on the GPU and 86 degrees on the CPU. So that means our temperatures are well below thermal throttling levels. Now when it comes to the clock speed you can expect, when you're in performance mode, the GPU pushes up to 111 watts of power, and you can see that clock speed boost of 1832 being much higher than the balanced and silent mode. So if you're trying to get moderately high FPS, you're definitely going to want to run the laptop in performance mode because you're roughly getting a 31 watt boost to the GPU, which will affect your performance and frame rates quite a lot. Now for the CPU in performance mode and balanced mode, we're getting 3.8 and 3.7 gigahertz respectively, so those are pretty similar. But in silent mode, the CPU is throttled quite a bit, down to 2.95 gigahertz. Now for our QHD benchmarks, you can see that the performance is very good in a lot of titles, allowing you to do a lot of lighter and medium heavy gaming, basically at QHD. But if you'll notice, you can see in Watch Dogs Legion and in Cyberpunk and in Red Dead Redemption, a lot of those games are going below 60 FPS. So what this tells me is that if you want to use the RTX 3060 for gaming at QHD, you're definitely going to have to reduce the settings down to medium and medium high, at least in some of these titles. All of that said, you can reduce the resolution down to 1920 by 1200 and expect to have dramatically improved FPS when playing on ultra settings. So how does the Legion 7 stack up versus other laptops in the market? In order to compare this laptop versus the competition, I did test a bunch of the games at 1080p resolution so we can make these comparisons. Let's take a look. In Cyberpunk 2077, we averaged 51 FPS, which is outperforming the RTX 3070 in the Zephyrus G15. I think this goes to show you that if you have a higher TDP GPU, you can sometimes outperform a class GPU above your own. Like in this instance, we have the 3070 in the Zephyrus being outperformed by an RTX 3060 with a higher TDP. Now we had truly excellent performance in Red Dead Redemption 2 with 72 FPS, beating out again an RTX 3070 in the MSI GS66. And you can see we also had 17 more FPS than the Zephyrus G14, though of course that is a very thin and light laptop, but I mainly just point that out because that also has an RTX 3060, but at a much lower TDP, but yet there's still such a massive difference in performance. For Watch Dogs Legion, we got 51 FPS, and this is pretty much at the bottom of the pack. Now in Far Cry 5, we got 100 FPS, which is very similar to a lot of these other Ryzen laptops, and this is a very CPU-sensitive game and tends to perform a bit better with Intel laptops. Now in Shadow of the Tomb Raider, we got 99 FPS, which is again very good performance, but we could probably score quite a bit better if we had faster memory in the laptop. In CSGO, we got 319, and again, this is one that is likely to be memory sensitive, and we could probably score a bit better if we had faster memory. For Rainbow Six Siege, we got 262, right in the middle of the pack, beating some of the lower watt RTX 3070s once again. And in The Witcher 3, we got 102 FPS, solid performance, but nothing amazing. Now for speaker loudness, we got 80 decibels, and this only has two 2-watt speakers, so they're not very powerful, but the good news here is that they are very clean sounding with good mids and highs, and you have noticeable bass. Overall, I'd say they're above average speakers, though they're not quite as loud as some of the competition. Now sadly, the battery life on the Legion 7 is very bad. Now under typical web browsing usage, I would expect to get around 5 hours of battery life. But unfortunately, when I did my battery testing, I was only getting about 2 to 2.5 hours of life, even though I was in NVIDIA Optimus mode, airplane mode, turned the brightness down. I just could not get the battery life to extend, and I was trying to figure out why. When checking HWinfo64, I noticed that the NVIDIA GPU keeps turning on for some reason. So if Lenovo can figure out their drivers and keep that NVIDIA GPU turned off, I would expect to get much better battery life around the 5-hour mark, and potentially in full airplane mode, super battery savings mode, maybe 7-ish hours. I don't know. I haven't been able to test that because, again, the battery life on this, as tested right now, is not great. Now we do have a webcam, but unfortunately there is no Windows Hello, and at this more premium price tag, I think Windows Hello would have been a welcome addition.
Okay, so this is the webcam right here. This is what it sounds like when I type on the keyboard.
Now there's obviously a lot of great things about the Legion 7, but why might you want to skip this laptop? Now arguably the biggest reason is that it's not the best performance for your money. You're definitely paying a lot extra for some of the premium features like the premium build quality, the high quality keyboard and touchpad, and the awesome display. There's a lot going on here, and if you're after the most FPS per dollar, this is not your laptop. If you're in the market for a laptop, I highly recommend checking out my spreadsheet comparing all of the gaming laptops for 2021 so far. I will keep updating this spreadsheet. Now it is updated and checked twice a day. I'm constantly adding more info to the sheet to be as helpful as possible. There's a link in the video description down below if you want to check it out. So if you're curious which laptops have the best bang for the buck around the $1,700 price point, I would highly encourage you to look at the Aorus 15P, the Legion 5 and 5 Pro, which are better bang for the buck versions of this laptop, as well as the Asus Strix G15 AMD Advantage Edition, because that comes with a Radeon RX 6800M, which competes with the RTX 3080 in some games, and that costs $50 less. I'll be doing a complete review on that laptop as well, so be sure to subscribe if you don't want to miss out on that review. I would say one of the big downsides of the Legion 7 that I have on hand is that the RTX 3060 just isn't powerful enough to play native QHD games, especially at the 16:10 aspect ratio, because it's a slightly more resolution at the max settings. Like, you're gonna want to turn the settings down, and I think that's kind of a con, and that would kind of direct me towards, if you're gonna buy a 2560 by 1600 laptop, either expect to go into it reducing some settings, or shell out a little bit more money and get an RTX 3070 or 3080 version instead, because those will be able to play QHD games pretty much consistently above 60 FPS. Even under the best conditions, the battery life on the Legion 7 is pretty bad compared to some of the competition. Now, I personally love using a laptop however I want, and it makes me very sad that you don't have custom fan profile curves as well as being able to set a max fan. I think a lot of enthusiast users will be mystified as to why Lenovo didn't include that, me included, and I hope Lenovo adds that in the future. So in the end, can I recommend the Legion 7? Yes, absolutely, but not for everyone. The Legion 7 is a delicious dash of premium, portability, and performance all wrapped up into one, and I can highly recommend it for people that don't mind shelling out a few extra dollars for those premium features. So that's my review of the Legion 7. I hope you found it helpful and informative, and if you did, drop a like and hit that subscribe button if you don't want to miss out on more of my content in the future. I'll see you in the next one. Brandon out. Huzzah.